So, welcome.
Thank you.
First of all,
These are
how many
comfy.
people in the audience have new Twitter? Yeah. And how many don't? So
About
you can fight
50%.
amongst yourselves. I just wanted to sow some dissent to start out with. The fundamental question, before we get started, I want to kind of define, we're going to talk a lot about API. An API is application programming interface, but this is the set of instructions that you give Twitter when you're building an application to get back information from it. And Twitter has a lot of APIs, right? You have the regular API, which is here's my tweets. You have search API, here's the keywords or hashtags I want to get back. You have the stream, which is real-time updates. You have @anywhere and other tools for putting like a tweet button on your site. First of all, how would you explain the difference between what all of those do and who they're for and which audiences they serve?
Sure. And I think actually I'd even add on top of that, like the tweet button is actually another kind of API that people are working with as well. And really, we think there are developers and builders all the way throughout the stack. And there's people that are using Twitter at many different levels, some that just want to put a tweet button on and send content out, some that want to do like hardcore data analysis, some that want to show different events. We need different products to serve each of those needs. And the REST and Search API kind of came out of the existing infrastructure we had with the website. But streaming and the tweet button and a lot of the JavaScript libraries are kind of newer additions we put on. The streaming, like user streams and streaming API, Firehose, that was one that really was born out of seeing how people use the APIs and trying to find better architectures to help serve their needs.
Now, how do you balance resources? Are those all separate teams that you have working on those different products? Is it sort of, right now streaming is really important, so everybody's on that task? How do you balance which one's a priority?
It's all part of one larger team as the platform. But within that team, we have smaller groups. One that works on kind of the front-end tools, and that's @anywhere and the tweet button and that kind of stuff. Streaming is a team of 2 guys. It's a very small group. Then the rest of the engineering team works on kind of like the core API infrastructure and the REST API.
Great. So, I was at the Chirp conference, Twitter Developer Conference, a couple months ago. At the time, the point of contention was Twitter was making first-party clients. Meaning, when you go on your Android phone, your iPhone, the app that you use for posting on Twitter is made by Twitter. And at the time, the declaration was, for the basic act of creating a tweet, we've got that covered. Go out and innovate over all these areas. And actually, that's been fairly well received. There's been a lot of apps created since then. And then more recently, there was another change to the developer ecosystem in terms of authentication. You introduced OAuth, which is a new system auth. Can you explain a little bit of the rationale there behind the introduction of the authentication change?
Yeah, OAuth was it's one, and we've supported OAuth, I think, for about 1.5 years, maybe even a little more. And it's kind of a geeky thing to go over the difference between that and some of the basic authentication. But the idea is, as an end user, you never actually have to give your credentials to a third-party app. You come to Twitter, you say, I want these guys to be able to work on my behalf, and you grant them access. It's more privacy aware, it's more secure for end users, and it's really the right model. It's a little harder for developers to use than something like basic authentication, but basic auth was something we had to kind of move an entire ecosystem over to this new architecture. It took a long time, and it was a lot of kind of making sure we churn through everybody and get them moved over, but I think it was the right thing to do, and it's good for kind of the future of the ecosystem.
Are there any other similar transitions that you anticipate happening where it's saying this system we're doing is going to have an end date and you need to go over here? Is there anything else that strikes you that way?
There's basic API deprecation. We want to continue to evolve the API as fast as we can. And in order to do that, you have to be able to make major leaps with some of the things you do. And that means if we put out an API v2, we're going to start some deprecation of API v1. Otherwise, you have to share resources on maintaining old code. So it's important for innovation and providing the best possible experience for users that we continue to innovate, which means some of these things will move, and the ecosystem will have to kind of grow with us and move with us.
Okay. So we're seeing tweet buttons pop up all over the place. How would you characterize what that's been from an infrastructure standpoint? Like, we haven't seen, a corresponding rise and fail whales or anything else, which I think a couple years ago would have been the case. What's the numbers you're doing? How many of those buttons are out there?
So TweetButton has been by far one of our most successful launches. And I was watching Brett's session yesterday. He talked about the value of keeping it incredibly simple. Like, we all think our APIs are simple, but we're still pretty geeky. Getting to something as simple as putting in a single line of code, either an iframe or a link, is incredibly powerful. And the adoption has just been kind of amazing. And it shows really the power of keeping it that simple. But one of the kind of core tenets when we were building the product was that we didn't want to see fail whales. We needed this thing to be able to scale so that any other website, whether it's Yahoo or Google or Microsoft, whatever their scale was, when they implemented it, it could hit our system in a way that would try and impact us. So we use edge caching and all sorts of stuff to make sure that it doesn't happen.
So going back to new Twitter again, there was an interesting statement you and a couple other folks on the Twitter team made of saying, for those who don't know or haven't seen it, the new Twitter is a new UI when you go to twitter.com. That in the stream, in the flow of reading your tweets from your friends, if you click on one of their tweets and they have a YouTube link, the video will pop up. If they have a photo link, the photo will pop up in the sidebar, and it's a really nice integrated experience. First of all, congratulations in that normally any popular site that changes even the slightest bit of its user interface, there's riots in the streets. It looks like a Baratunde campaign. And this time, actually, it was like this has been a positive response.
It was a welcome change.
Yeah. So talk about what you did as a platform to enable the Twitter experience to go from a simple column of text to this all singing, all dancing multimedia extravaganza.
It was also, the company's grown over the years and we've had some major projects, but this was far and away the largest project we've undertaken, crossed over every team. We changed the way the entire website works. It's actually, our website now is a pure API consumer, just like every other client in the network, and almost the entire site's written in JavaScript. So it's really eating our own dog food and really kind of helping us exercise all the same things that we want all of our outside developers working on. So we look at it in that way as a platform. The right detail pane, right now we're starting with media.
Yep.
We have about 16 partnerships in place. Right. We're looking at all the different possibilities that has to offer, and we're really excited about new Twitter.
So calling out that one point where you say eating our own dog food, and we get into our tech jargon a little bit, I want to emphasize what you're saying is, theoretically, somebody could use the public interfaces for Twitter and build the entire new Twitter experience the same way you did.
Yeah, actually,
right?
There were very few APIs that we had to add to make new Twitter happen.
And those are all documented publicly?
Those are all documented publicly. There's obviously a few private ones, like adding new applications, adding new devices, stuff like that need to be kind of held.
But the main reading experience?
But the main, browsing and reading experience was actually built on the APIs that have been around for 6 months, 9 months, a year. It was really just a reimagining of what that experience could be and how to reduce the friction from what people are sharing to being able to consume it and really kind of start to shift Twitter to more of a consumption experience.
So there's the kind of business strategy thing about drawing people to the twitter.com website and what, having embedded media and embedded video clips is obviously aimed towards doing that. I want to talk a little bit more about the technology of that happening. And when we were talking last week, I was saying, 20 years ago, Microsoft tried to do, object linking and embedding. You were going to embed an Excel spreadsheet in a Word doc. And around 15 years ago, maybe Apple was doing OpenDoc, and you were going to be able to put embed objects in your web browser. And every 5 or 10 or 15 years, people have tried to say we're going to embed this one rich kind of media in this other media, and it kind of works, and then it tends to peter out. And here we are at 15 years in on the web, and that still hasn't happened in a popular way. Now, the broad question is, do you think this is a first step towards that? Do you think Twitter being able to seamlessly include YouTube and Flickr and photos and all these other things is a step towards embedding media from one site into another one?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different edges to that and a lot of different ways it can go. We definitely don't just want to open an iframe and kind of throw content on the page. I think that's why we looked at media as a first easy step. It's very obvious what you're trying to bring in from each of those sites, and it's obvious what the interaction is that you're trying to promote. As you get more into the interactive functional pieces, I think it starts to become less obvious.
Right.
And that's where we're taking a lot of our time kind of thinking through what that'll be.
There's an open standard called OEmbed used to bring over content from one site to another that came from the developer community. Is that something you're making use of in bringing that media over now?
Yeah, so out of the 16 partners we support, we use OEmbed, I think, for all of those, maybe not all of them, but most of them. But instead of allowing anyone to throw it in, we work with these 16 partnerships, and we'll slowly grow that.
Why a list of partners?
I think it's just trying to be cautious. We want to provide the best possible experience, and doing so means talking to those partners and knowing what they want out of it as well, and making sure it's kind of a mutually beneficial thing. Okay. We definitely want to start to explore that, and we're looking at that now. But
so there's probably people from media companies here. How do they become one of those partners?
Right now, email contentpartnerships@twitter.com. It's a very short email. You can also email me. I'm rsarver at Twitter. But yeah, we're starting to build that up. There's obviously a lot of inbound interest right now.
Right.
But we're trying to build out that program.
Okay. And then I want to talk about a big challenge for all platforms, but I think particularly for yours, which is the surface area of interfaces you make available, APIs you make available, is constantly increasing, right? So you build a new Twitter and you say, oh, we need to have these 3 new methods that do this thing, and then somebody builds a BlackBerry app and you have to build these other new methods. Yet every time these new APIs come out, they're not always adopted. So you had the core platform, I'm going to write a tweet, and every client in the world supports that. And then you added geolocation, and there's pretty good adoption, but it's not 100%. And then you added annotations, which was theoretically the ability to shoehorn any kind of reasonably sized data into a tweet. You were going to be able to take not just 140 characters, but all kinds of creative things. And there hasn't, and granted these are still in beta, but there hasn't been very broad adoption compared to the adoption of the core API.
Yep.
Is the moment in which you can get the third-party developer community to adopt those over? Or is this something that's just going to take a longer period of time?
I think it's a good question. I mean, part of it is we want to provide the best experience on all the major platforms. You've seen us start to do that with iPhone and Android and BlackBerry. And you'll see a consistent kind of what we deem the best possible experience for what we think the Twitter audience is. Clients outside of that are open to adopt any bits and pieces that they want to provide what they think is the best experience. So, we obviously have concepts of what we think that proper experience is, but I don't think it's something we can force downstream. And I think there is different needs in different markets, and you'll see geo in some places and not in other places, and I think that's okay.
Could you declare that didn't work, we're just going to give up on that API we were trying to do?
I don't think so. I mean, we build it because we think we need it.
Okay.
We also hear stuff from the community that we want to build in, but rarely are we building something that we think is speculative for the community, and no one adopts it, and we're going to shut it off. I do think we're committed to looking at things and cutting back when we need to, but on API side, I think we're pretty consistent.
Great.